I'm really happy to be here. I love the state. Virginia is a lovely state. It looks much like our Ozarks. We are from the southern Missouri Ozarks. Same kind of ground, except we're a lot thinner. We've never had row cropping. So Virginia kind of looks like an uptown Ozarks. You guys have older homesteads and farms, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful state. But so are we. And it's a great place to raise cattle. Okay, here's a bit of a snapshot of our farm. 160 to 200 April, May calving calves. Just to note, that's about 60% of our carrying capacity. In other words, you have we have stock density when we're grazing, and then we have a carrying capacity on the farm, right? We don't stock our farm full with mama cows, and there's a reason for that. We like it to be in about that 60% range. The other 40% is going to be those grazing yearlings, mostly ours. We do buy more South Pole steers in now, though, because we're marketing so many to the grass finishers. We'll raise those yearlings up, and we'll talk about that later. But they're 40%. That is a very flexible group of animals. In other words, if we get a drought, we get really dry in April, May, June, somewhere in there, we don't ever have to touch the cow herd. We have something that we can make a phone call and have them all gone quickly. We call it, it's a real cushion around them to protect during dry weather. We've noticed over years a lot of people stock their farm capacity with mama cows. There's nothing very enjoyable about having to figure out how to sell mama cows or buying a bunch of hay during a drought. It kind of builds on itself. So this is an important part of our operation. That's why we have, not only do we have the grazing yearlings, but they're also usually the biggest profit center on our farm. We're strictly grazing. We don't put up hay anymore. I highlighted sell 50 to 7 home-raised brood cows because that's tied very much to our Heifer Development program. Okay, that's hay and salt and mineral only supplements. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Grazing school comes out to our farm every year. We have grazing schools in Missouri. And over the years, we kind of find it funny. Becky was talking about that, all the different names of the grazing systems over our time. And we've probably tried every one of them. I didn't try the one started in 1760, though, which I love, is rational grazing. You ration out how much you eat, and also you ask the cows and the grass to be rational about how far you push each one of them, you know. But that was the first written record of rotational grazing. It was back in 1760. It's not the newest thing in the world. But what we found over time was that people, especially back then, nobody talked about the animals to fit those grazing systems. You know, they didn't think about it. We were setting these things up, we were going to graze, we didn't talk about what kind of animals we needed to fit that grazing system. And we found that to be a very important component of what we do. We started that in 1987. I had never seen high tensile fence. I'd never seen a grazing system before. And we started one. And we made some terrible mistakes. Terrible mistakes. And we still make mistakes to this day, just not quite as many. Whoop, wrong way. So what I plan to cover today, spring calving. Why am I talking about spring calving? Because it's a catalyst, a centerpiece for all the other things we do on this farm. From the heifers to the cattle. This is a change we made that we found made an extreme difference in our profitability. The philosophy we use in selecting our replacement heifers, then we're going to go a quick trip from weaning a heifer calf to when we are going to preg check them as a 2-year-old. We'll go through the grazing that we do in that period and what we're expecting of the cows. I got some numbers to show you about where the herd stands now. They're simple numbers, breed back, the weights they are at different ages, and their calving intervals and weaning weight percentages. I love to sell spring calving. And when Judy and I started, we bought 185 sale-born cows, and they calved all year round. We narrowed it down to 90 days starting in January. We were spring calvers Because in the cattle business, January to March is spring calving. It's the only industry I know that can take a season and make it whatever they want it to be. This is real spring calving. We calve from the middle of April to the 1st of June, 45 days. 45 days. Why do we do that? Well, like you, from what I see here in Dakota's farm, which is beautiful, by the way. He took me on a tour of this place yesterday, and I'm so envious of the native grasses he's getting worked into that fescue. It was just a beautiful trip. Of course, I got all the pollen, and I'm a grass farmer allergic to grass, so that's why I got my pockets full of tissue so I can clean up when I'm talking to you. But 70% of your growth is going to come from middle of April to about the middle of June. Is that about right? Okay, that's the surplus of grass. The greens, the spring flush of grass. When a cow calves, sheared volume, the amount of hay or amount of grass she needs will just about double. It's like getting a second herd. From the ration maintenance diet we were giving her in the winter, her intake will almost double. And the quality of our grass at that time, matching the spring flush of grass, is almost exactly the same. And it's the only time a cow, through her entire gestation lactation, really needs high quality feed, is from calving to breeding. Because the number one thing getting a profitable cow is reproduction. She has to be fertile and have a calf every 365 days. The spring calving also allows us to have yearling heifers and yearling steers that become short yearlings, ready to utilize that spring flush. Now, short yearling just means that, their birth date is April and May, and we're talking about having short yearlings because we wean in March, right? So we call them short yearlings when they haven't quite made yearlings, and then we sell them as long yearlings, just to give you the terminology. We sell them as long yearlings, not the heifers, but the steers. Having the heifers gaining all this weight, which we will talk about, compensatory gain, we can get them to come and cycle 1 time, 2 times, even 3 times before we put the bull in. That means you have a really good chance of getting your animals bred. The steers, we simply keep them and sell them as 700-800 pounders in August and September. They go to grass finishers. We utilize the spring flush to put weight on profitably and inexpensively. If we can get a cow to put on weight from calving to breeding, we can almost guarantee if she's going to be pregnant. South Poles play a big part in this, or the South Pole breed. Okay? South Pole breed because we can get them bred to calve in the middle of April and May. So the disadvantages, they're pretty big ones. July and August. You have to get them bred, right? This is the number one reason people don't calve in the spring. July and August. We went through hundreds and hundreds of cows, dozens and dozens of bulls, trying to select a breed that could breed in July and August. We have endophyte infected fescue. We have heat indexes. Last year, during breeding season, it hit 115 degrees. Endophyte is going to, you all familiar with endophyte? Yeah, everybody, yeah. Well, that raises it 10 degrees, right? Vascular restrictor, ergovaline, is going to restrict their cooling ability and getting them bred. I can tell you, it was a process. We bought cattle all out Texas, Southeast, Mississippi, Louisiana, Brahma cross cattle, trying to get them to breed. And then, because I was trying to do things right, we decided to use Angus bulls. I regret to this day what I put those bulls through. Yeah, it almost makes me cry. Trying to get them to breed in the middle of summer. It was terrible. Cows will absorb their fetuses. If you have cows that are panting, wallowing in their own manure and trying to get a cool spot, have you ever seen that? When cows get so hot, they start, okay, if you have cattle doing that, don't even think about this. If you have nothing but Kentucky 31 and a little bit of clover, don't think about this. You got to have diversity in your pasture. We graze fescue without grazing fescue. What Judy does every day, she moves cows every day. And we'll have Johnson grass, giant ragweed, common ragweed, lesbides, red clover, orchard grass, brome grass, all of it in that fescue, and a lot of summer weeds just like that in the fescue. We encourage diversity. If she sees them eating too much fescue, that day. The next day the paddock's a little bigger. The last thing they will eat is fescue, you can guarantee it. And we don't want to eat too much fescue. South Poles have a tolerance for the endophyte, but they're not immune to it. They're not immune to it. So if you are grazing nothing but Kentucky 31 and a little bit of clover, I don't actually know how you make money grazing cattle. Seed production, yes. Grazing cattle, no. You got to have some diversity in there. But these cattle can get bred in the summer. Oh my goodness. Okay. Spring calving we've left, and now we're going to our breeding program. I remember when I found that book, Judy and I, one of our hobbies is going to old bookstores and finding used agricultural books, old agricultural books. And I found this. It wasn't that old, but it is from the 70s. I fell in love with Beefmasters. And I realize now it wasn't the Beefmasters I fell in love with, but the philosophy of the breeding system. We used Beefmasters for years. Really good cattle. Really good cattle. And we got right from the Lassiter farm. But the Beefmasters did not do for us what the South Poles did very quickly. They were bred for a brittle, non-humid environment. We are a non-brittle, very humid environment. They were bred perfectly for where they were, not for where we are. I was fiddling around putting these slides together. Judy had come in from moving the heifers and setting up the next paddock for tomorrow. He came and started working in the kitchen, and I found that quote. And I yelled at her from the dining room to the kitchen, "What do you think of this? I let nature do most of the work and all of the thinking." And Judy stuck her head back in and says, "Is nature my new nickname?" But what he is talking about is his breeding system. And that is the heart of this breeding system. This is called mass population genetics selection. We'll keep every heifer we have, give them a chance to fit the program. And that's what Lassiter does. That's what some other real famous cattlemen have done. If you get where you're really trying to select for a fertile, this is a great, it can't be beat for selecting fertility and adaptability, this system. And I better look at my memory, which is my notes. Excuse me, just a minute. So a lot of people will talk about, oh, yeah, I'm there. That's good. A lot of people talk about the Lassiter philosophy as a culling program. Yeah, I cull every open cow. You hear that a lot. Yeah, I use the Lassiter system. Well, it's not a culling program, it's a breeding program. Culling is part of it. But what you're doing with these animals is you're putting pressure on them all the time. And that pressure comes in the form of what qualities you want in your animals. Lassiter had the six essentials. A lot of his don't fit what I look for in a southern, Midwest cattle operation. What he was looking for in a hard grass, dry operation. So we pick what we want, but both of us overlap on fertility and adaptation. You'll notice up there, there's nowhere about whether they have enough white on them or no white on them at all, whether they have a pretty head, what color they are the perfect red that we're looking for. None of those things are important to us. We're looking for financial reasons why we want what we want to select for. Fertility. Our pressure on that is the heifers have to calve at 24 months of age. And they're raised as a stalker, meaning we are going to make money on the opens. We raise them cheap. There's no feeding to breeding. Half a bale of hay after weaning on to spring grass. She then has to raise that calf the first time and every time, 9.5 to 10 months of age. We do that weaning late for a reason. We're looking to have moderate milkers, even low to moderate milkers. The high milkers will milk too much if you keep calves on them that long. They'll fall out the next year. We don't want high milking cows. They'll make great cows for somebody else. But in our system, we don't want high milking cows. And then she has to calve again 365 days later as a 3-year-old. Once you've done that, if you get them to calve at 2 and not push them, and then they turn around and they breed back and they calve as 3-year-olds, and they raise a good acceptable calf, all questions of fertility have been answered. Long-term fertility is that. It's done. It doesn't answer all the questions about the cow that long-term fertility has. Adapted is the other quality we're looking for. And I'm going to talk about that. I have a whole slide for that one. Temperament. Well, it used to be temperament was a big part of our selection process. We had to cull out quite a few animals. With the South Poles, they are embarrassingly gentle. But not all of them. You still have to go through and push them. But yeah, they're embarrassingly gentle. As you get older, you get to appreciate it. Though I do kind of miss the excitement of some of my Brahmas. Mother inability, that's a little redundant on the calving. But what that means, if we lose them to disease, a calf dies because of disease, or a calf gets killed by coyotes, which I have never had happen, or lightning strikes them, they're gone. We get rid of all of them. They'll make good cows for somebody else, but they're gone. Judy, we're human. So Judy has an ace card she plays. She gives herself 1 cow a year to hold back. And she doesn't play it very often, but when she does, half the time we're not happy because one of the real nice qualities of the South Pole is their fleshing ability. And they get too fat. Most of the open cows now, we don't even breed them and sell them as breeding stock, transparently sell them to people. A lot of those open cows will go right into the grass-fed market. We fatten them for wholesalers, they sell to the retailers. So, you saw what we wanted from our fertile forage harvesters. They have to ask something from us, right? When you get employed, what are you going to do for them? We have to breed them so that they can thrive in our system. So our breeding system is set up that they can thrive in our system. We have to make them heat tolerant, fertile, and ability to handle stress, which is your fescue endophyte infected fescue. Fescue endophyte infected. Endophyte infected fescue. Matching the nutritional cycle to the seasonal cycle. Okay, we talked about that, right? What is that? That's the spring flush. When they need high quality feed, we're giving them high quality feed. But when March rolls around and they're all in the exact same gestational period, we can now start cutting them back. We give them a ration and it's lower quality feed. We don't have to worry. That's a low time in their cycle for the nutritional quality they need. But we don't have them all spread out. We have them all as a unit, as a herd, so that we can feed them in a way that we make money and profit, and they always have enough to eat and just what they need to eat. But we're also putting pressure on them because those animals all have to fit into that. They don't, they're gone. That's not a throwaway line at the end. As we get older, we do more and more thinking about that. We can't ever give her a fully natural life because we have fences, we have our management, but we try to do as much as we can to let a cow be a real cow. So I talked about adapted, right? Several times. We found that to be one of the most important qualities of the South Pole. It's what we bred for so many years. I sure wish Teddy Gentry had gotten to the South Pole a lot earlier. Of course, we had a lot of adventures as well. But this is what it means to us. Fescue tolerant. As we were talking about, it's naturalized, it's there. They just have to get used to it. Okay? Heat tolerant. We were breeding for that for a long time. When you're breeding in July and August, you better have some very heat tolerant animals. Better have them, or they can take it. In 2016, we hosted a field day, South Pole Field Day. Teddy Gentry was there. The heat index was 100 degrees the day he came. And he said, so where are the cattle? And I said, down grazing a bunch of Johnson grass coming up through the fescue. He says, well, tomorrow when the tour comes, they're all going to be balled up in the shade, right? He said, they don't have any shade. And he said, well, then he got really nervous. Well, we better go look at them. And we went down there, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Johnson grass was their only shade because it was pretty tall. And we went through all the cows, and we went and looked at the heifer herd, and we looked at the steers, and there was not one heat-stressed animal. We were at 100-degree heat index. There was not one heat-stressed animal in the bunch. They were grazing. Teddy was ecstatic. I was excited. That was like a day we've been waiting for a long time, was that year. It hasn't always stayed that way. We have animals that get hot still. They get marked and go on. But that day was a pretty special day. But then a cold front came in. The next day it was about 80 degrees, and nobody got to see all of it. But it didn't matter. Teddy did, and he was excited. He spent a lot of time putting these animals together. Big appetite. What would that mean? We get a lot of lignified grass. Right now this grass looks beautiful, right? But in a little while it's going to head out, become lignified. We have to have animals that can eat a lot more than what the books say they can eat. We want a big-bellied animal. We want to be able to take in that lignified feed and thrive on it and do fine on it. And a cow's needs go down. They can do just fine on that kind of grass. They also should eat about 90% of what we grow, which is, every 4 grass. Ours have broadened their appetite. Diversity has become what they enjoy. We notice keeping the same cows on the same farm over time, they learn to eat just about everything. Just about everything. Fleshing ability. We want a cow that can put on flesh, and this is what South Pole has brought to us. Beef masters are not easy fleshing animals. We found out how important that is with these South Poles. They put on fat. Putting on flesh is like putting a bale of hay on their back. So when things get tough, they can use that fat to get by on. And then they can turn around when things get good and put it right back on again. So they can work it off, then put it back on again. To us, it's really important that a profitable cow and easy fleshing go together. We also think fleshing ability and fertility are tied together. So this cow, I even wrote a note for myself so I wouldn't forget. I had a little ditty here. She's standing in the middle of the field, in the middle of the day, in the middle of a drought, in the middle of breeding season. She is what we would call adapted. And Judy gave me another one to put. These are all Judy's photos. So here's the yearlings and 2-year-olds. Same day. 2 p.m., you see the bulls working. You see the cows not stressed. You can still see the same good grazing management. Now remember, we were in the middle of a drought. This is real world here, so we thought it's good to see. But this is the kind of heat tolerance these cattle have. But we had selected for heat tolerance for all those years beforehand, and then added South Pole to them. Heat tolerance has been really important in our breed for a long time, but the South Pole have been the most heat tolerant animal that we have been around. Other than I worked on a farm, we had pure Brahmas. I'm going to say the pure Brahmas probably were just as heat tolerant, if not more, and a lot more exciting. I haven't mentioned much weaning weights, right? We didn't have that in the parameters. They had to wean a calf at a certain weight. We want acceptable, marketable calves. Weaning weight, we have found, plays very little importance in our profitability. And yet it's the #1 marker, right? When cattlemen talk to you, what do they ask you about? Weaning weights. What'd you wean? This guy, Travis Mullinex, he was at Nebraska. He's with, who's that? Do you know that guy from Nebraska? Doesn't really matter. Anyway, at Nebraska, they're working on some really cool stuff for low-cost heifer development. That's it. It's nice to have memory spread around the farm, around the audience for me. Funston. Those 2 guys put together a lot of great papers. They're about low-cost heifer development. Some really interesting things about how big they have to be to turn them in, how much it pays not to feed them a lot for longevity and for how long they last. They got some neat stuff, but right up there he says, calf weaning weight has been shown to have as low as 5% influence on the profitability of the farm and ranch. 5%. On the other hand, the economic value of reproduction is reported to be 5 times greater than calf growth or milk traits. Reproduction. That's what we keep talking about, is reproduction, number 1, number 2, number 3, if you want to make money. This is what South Poles do shine at. I'm up here, I guess I'm selling the South Pole, but it has been a big change for us. What people don't always realize is heavy milking cows, their maintenance requirements are just about as high when they're not milking as when they are milking. It doesn't go down. You're paying for that higher maintenance cost all year round. Okay, a math question for you guys. I see a lot of you guys are pretty experienced cattlemen out here. Your neighbor Joe sorts off 20 steers. Sorts them off, weans them, and puts them on the trailer and sends them to the sale barn all the same day. And they're bred over a 90-day, 100-day period. They sort off his top 5 steers. They weigh 575 pounds. What was the average weaning weight of Joe's steers? 575 pounds. The others might have weighed 300 pounds. It doesn't matter. The top 5 are 575 pounds. And that's what you're always, when people talk in the coffee shop, that's what we always hear. It's a game we play. It's often the only time anybody weighs their cattle is when they wean them and take them to the sale barn. And it's a false number for profitability. But we usually don't have enough numbers to know whether we're being profitable or not anyway in the cow-calf business. So that's the number we use, is weaning weight. Highly unimportant. Has to be acceptable. Don't get me wrong, we keep weaning weights, but it's not what drives profitability. What drives profitability in the South Pole, we are a maternal breed. We produce females. That's what the breed is for. It's been so long since we've had true maternal breed, a lot of people don't realize that. This is a maternal breed. We supply females. If you want higher weaning weights, what our goal is to produce a bunch of these kind of cows for the commercial man to breed to a Charolais bull or a terminal, a Lim Angus, a terminal sire. How many are you familiar with maternal and terminal, with those words? Oh, okay. Get an animal, go straight to market. You're going to sell heifers, steers, everything. Growth is what you're after. Growth and fertility, growth and maternal don't usually go together. They're completely different cats. Maternal is how we'd have the Angus cow, and we'd get a little growthier Hereford bull, and we'd put them on there and produce black baldies. We'd get that hybrid vigor. That's a free lunch, right? So Kim knows that. Then you would, cross them back again. That's what we used to do in the cattle business till the European invasion that we were talking about this morning. When we came in with the limousines, actually it was the Charolais and the Celiers and then the Simmentals, all of a sudden now we were going to have all in one, fertile and terminal. Well, Teddy Gentry figured out how to make a maternal cow again. And not only do that, but he put it with icing on it and cherry on top, because we also got fleshing ability and heat tolerance and fescue tolerance in them. There was no maternal animals that had that I know of since then. We are a true maternal breed, so we're making heifers. I give them half a bale of hay, throw some bulls in, they graze a surplus grass, we've put $1,000 on them. Just like that. That's what I'm interested in doing. How many of you know Burke Teichert? I'm sorry to be surprised. He is somebody, if you don't know him, he does Burke's blog on the beef, well, I think I have it up there, Beef Magazine. There's nobody in the business who has a deeper knowledge and a more breadth of knowledge than Burke Teichert. To preface this, and I'm just backing up a little bit of our philosophy here, Burke Desert Ray Ranch is the largest cattle company in the country. Okay, he had the resources to push, to say, let's get the best cattleman there is. Sorry. The best cattleman there is. Have I been like that through the whole thing? I'm sorry. The best cattleman the best cattleman to pick heifers. to pick them. And he then used half of them that way, where they were picked, linear measurements, some of the other things. And then the other half was nature system picking them, like what we're talking about. They were sure they could do it. So you read up there, nothing that we measured, by itself or in combination, could predict enough of the economic difference in outcomes to confirm our belief that we could, in fact, select replacement heifers. My observations on many heifers since then have strengthened my conviction that we can't select heifers accurately, but the bulls in our environment can. In other words, they were sure they could, and they didn't. And Burke said it wasn't even close. Nature system. Okay, we'll get right to it. How am I doing on time, Becky?
35 minutes.
Okay. This is our system. 90 to 99% of the raised heifers are turned in with the bulls. Like I said before, it was 90, now it's 99 because we don't have very many outliers in the South Pole. We don't have too many temperament problems. We don't have as many, with the Angus and beef. We used to have hairballs, and we had some that were too framey, and we got them out. We don't have the outliers much anymore. This is the heart of the system. We have a large number of qualified, that means they've passed the system, replacement heifers, or replacements to come into the herd. That means the top cows, the cows in the main herd, the ones above them, are constantly being pressured. This is like having a farm system. Major League Baseball, they got your farm system. That's what we're developing, our farm system. Then we got the guys in the major leagues. Well, some of those guys are getting towards the end of their career, or the contracts are too high, they're getting too big, or whatever. We're bringing young animals up all the time, putting pressure on the cows above them. So we have a lot of cows to sell. We raise them as stockers. The opens will be profitable, and so will the ones that get bred. They've just been weaned. We try to wean somewhere right around February. The steers and the heifers run together. They'll do that until we pull the heifers out to get bred and run with the 2-year-olds. They will have some really efficient rumens, and we'll take advantage of the spring flush. As I said before, this is our #1 profit center most years. Before I go into this, I want to say something real quick, just because I met a lot of really nice people yesterday here, and I was surprised at how many new producers we had, people new to grazing and new to cattle coming in. I'm going to talk about compensatory gain. I'm going to talk about a lot of this. I'm going to talk about no supplements. I just want to point out that I think supplements are important. I have a friend who said, you earn the right not to have to supplement. And you earn the right not to have to deworm your cattle. You earn that by learning your grazing management. Don't let your animals suffer because you don't want to feed them anything, because that's what everybody says you can do. Don't feed them. Supplement works really well at times. Everybody should feel like that's something they have in the toolbox. We don't, because we've been doing this a long time. And our markets call for it. We can't. But we never did anyway, once we got our grazing down pretty good. But I sometimes think we think the South Pole is bulletproof. They are the best we've ever had, but they're not bulletproof. So keep an eye on it. We don't want those big-headed, small-bodied animals. If you have to feed them because you're learning how to graze and you haven't figured it all out yet, and you won't, please take care of your animals. Don't make your animals suffer from your learning, okay? There's nothing wrong with supplementation. There's nothing wrong with deworming them. Take a fecal sample. $10, a fecal sample into the veterinarian, and they can tell you if you got worms or not. And if you have worms, and it's at the stage they need to be dewormed, deworm them. Your grazing can have a lot to do with whether calves and yearlings pick up worms. Okay, so now I'm going to do another one. How many have heard of Dr. Gordon Hazard? All right. Boy, I am getting old. Wow. He was the real deal. He was a famous Mississippi cattleman, 1,800 steers on 3,000 acres. Has a lot written about him. I met him in Jackson, Mississippi in the early 90s. Bud Williams and Gordon Hazard were at a conference, and the two of them, there's probably 40 people there. One of the best 2 days of my life. He explained how to make money in the beef cattle grazing business better than anybody I've ever heard. I went home, we set up our grazing system, our marketing system, our breeding system, all around what we learned in those 2 days, 3 decades ago. Compensatory gain. The bovine has the ability to exist for months on practically a maintenance ration, and then put on above normal gain as its plane of nutrition increases. We must keep wintering expenses low, using cheap roughage while we wait for the spring and grass. Compensatory gain is one of the cattleman's best friends. And this is what I want to make sure that people getting into this don't do. We don't let these animals go backwards. They never losing weight, right? But we're not putting expensive gains on them in the wintertime. Does nature put gains on her animals in the wintertime? No. It's very natural for a herbivore to go through winter on a very low plane of nutrition and gain. We keep these heifers and calves that you just saw happy and healthy. We're in them every day. That's a skill. You have to learn how you read your animals, whether they're doing well. Happy and healthy. All we're trying to do is give them a little bit of gain, put a little bit of frame on maybe, but really be developing a rumen that's going to be efficient for that spring flush of grass. Does that make sense? Okay. So once we get through that time, winter, right? We wintered them, and we start off in March, first part of, or about the middle of March, we start grazing for real intent. And I wrote that down. It needs to be very intentional grazing, and I had no idea what it meant. So I looked at that word and I decided it looked really good there. So I came up with what I think it means, and that means we think about grazing from the morning in the spring. Grazing is first thing on our mind in the morning and throughout the day. Our success for the whole year depends on our spring, how well we utilize that spring flush of grass. So we think about it a lot. This is the most important time for the development of your heifers, is spring. It's very important to get gains during this 12 to 18 month period. Really important. You want them to have a little bit more than they can eat in a day when you're moving your paddocks. You want them gaining at least 1.5 pounds a day. We hope to get to 2. Our purchased cattle gain 1.7 from March to September on grass alone. And sometimes we hit 3. If we get Johnson grass and giant ragweed growing really well, we can put 3 pounds a day on them. Somebody needs to sell giant ragweed. So here they are, 17 to 18 month old bred heifers. And they will soon be going into the cow herd. This is what we're after. They were fairly cheap to get bred. And about 90% of them will do so. Okay. I've got my memory here on the pieces of paper. They've gone from the fall, right? That last picture, 17 to 18 months old. They're fall cattle now, right? Now they've gone into winter. We've weaned the calves. This is March. This is not the highest quality stockpile you're going to see. They're going to be calving in a month. Yearlings, 2-year-olds, and cows are all together, one herd. That's about 80,000 pound density. You can kind of see the line right there. You can see we're not asking them. This is not total grazing. We're not grazing it into the ground. They're getting as much green as they can. They're just starting to stack a little bit. Their manure, we're watching it all the time. But they're all in the same stage of gestation, right? So we know that they can handle this. That's why we like to have that very short season. Marketing, and because we can manage them as a unit. Now we're going into the heifers. This is Judy's page. Once they start calving the heifers out and the cows, Judy, it's all hers. She takes care of them all. We'll calve out. This year we were 62. We calve out usually 60 to 70 a year. Some years we got up to 100. And she does a really good job. An amazing job, actually. That was her saying. I constantly talk about nature. I kind of like all those sayings, like I said about Lassiter. And she says, yeah, but it ain't all natural. And it's not. We have fences. She says, I will quit coming out here 3 and 4 times a day, check them and make everything's all right. If you open all the fences up, take the fences down and the neighbors and let them roam, I'm happy with them. That's natural. We're keeping them within a confined area. They can only graze and eat what's there. They can't always get away. We're still moving them every day. So Judy is the epitome of husbandry. She does things out there with those heifers. You know, I would do it. I couldn't carry a gun. If Judy wasn't doing it, I don't know if we'd be calving out this many heifers. That's for sure. It can be a little bit of a trying time. This year we calved out 62. She touched 2 of them. She pulled 2. One she doesn't want to count because she wanted to go to bed, and it was right there, so she just yanked it. But she didn't count it. But we do count. We pay attention to that. But out of 62 heifers, about 850 pounds, we touched 2 heifers, pulled 2 calves. We have walkaways. I think Judy got that word from you, Bruce. They calve, they walk away. Doesn't happen very often, but it happens. We got mismothering. Judy can handle some of that. She'll put in poly wire around them and separate a cow. You know, a cow, when she's calving, and we have like 6 or 8 at a time, and you're in a small area, and there's a brand new calf. Let's say her buddy just had one, and she's got this calf just coming out, the legs are out, you know, and the head's out but not quite ready, and she's walking around with all the hormones rushing that she wants to take care of that baby, and she goes and starts taking care of her friend's calf. Well, now that's become her calf. Then she goes and has her calf. She says, I found my baby, if I could just get rid of what's behind me here. And Judy will see that and separate them out and let her have her calf alone. Is this genetic? We've never seen it happen except in the heifers. Okay? It's not like it's passed on and it goes on or they do it again next year. We don't think so. Is it something we could put pressure on and make it that they're gone? We could. But we're not going to while Judy's taking care of them. It's not going to happen. She moves the heifers every day, but at lower densities. We want these to have a little bit special grass. The reason they have their own grazing cell is there's a hierarchy in the cow herd. They're on the bottom. We're going to give them a little extra. They become the top dogs because we put the yearlings in with them, right? And so we run those together, but we keep them separate. There's also logistics. Our farm is long. We got lots of creeks and roads. We like everybody having their own grazing cell in the spring when we got baby calves. Some of the grazing cells are 2.5 miles down a dirt road, and try moving baby calves down a dirt road at that time. Here they are, just a picture of them when they're about to wean. September, October, they're soon to become cows. We'll preg check them and they'll go into the cow herd. And then we start all over again. Didn't talk much about bulls. Bulls are really important. Our program does not develop heifers, does not develop udders. We have to get the udder quality from the bulls. We select for udders when we go to sell, but we don't, there's nothing in those 4 qualities that we were talking about having a perfect udder. But we're looking for those perfect udders. Udders are tied to longevity. They're important. We're looking for people like Bruce and Sunshine, like the breeders you have here, seed stock producers, to give us bulls with good udders. Good cow families, good udders. We have to buy those bulls. We are broodstock producers. We're purebred, but we're selling to commercial people. Right? Most of our cows are going to commercial cattlemen. But we go to the seed stock producers to get those really good bulls that have come from families with good udders and have all the other traits that we're looking for. We always use multi-sired. We like all the bulls running together. We DNA test. We want to know who's breeding. We think that answers a lot of questions about libido and the set of the legs and all that kind of thing. How many did they get bred? You put 5 bulls in together, 150 cows, and you see who breeds the most, and it's often very surprising. Here's some numbers. Pregnancy rate last 5 years. We put them in either July 4th to July 10th. The main herd, 94 to 97%. That's good enough. We don't want to go any higher than that. When you only have 2 cycles, you're going to have some cows that are going to absorb their calves. Things are going to happen just like it does in humans and other animals. 94 to 97, we think is kind of a sweet spot. First calf heifers, this is the number that we're proud of. Even though we don't pick the animals, I'm still proud of it. 90 to 95%. That changed our whole program. This was South Poles. When we went to South Poles, our 2-year-olds started breeding back. They stay fleshier. They're more fertile. That changed everything. That's why we can sell 50 brood cows a year, is because we get such a good breed back now in the first calf heifers. And yearlings, we just bank on 90%. 90 to 95% do calve in that first 30 days. Weights, people are interested in weights. 850 to 890 pounds. This is a range, an average over a few years. That's what our 2-year-old heifers will weigh, 3-year-olds, and you see what our mature cows are. This is kind of a busy chart. One on the left is cow weight divided by calf weaning weight. What percentage of her body weight did she wean a calf at? 2-year-olds, 51%. 51% and 52 on the cows. You saw our weights though, they're not that big. These aren't bragging rights, weaning weights. They're good, acceptable weaning weights. What we care about is what are their yearling weights. And we found they'll make up for it. We have a bad year. Our weaning weights have to do with what kind of season, what kind of grazing season we're having. Not so much how much the cow milks. And when we have low weaning weights, we find they make up for it, gain a little more, and reach yearling weight just about the same. The one on the right is calving interval. It's kind of an amazing one, really, I think so anyway. I keep this. How long did it take him to calve back? 364 days. Cut a day off as a 2-year-old. That seems impressive to me. In other words, the average of the herd of the 2-year-olds went back a day. 3-year-olds, 361, and the 4+ 362. They all cut off, went backwards as an average, which means we average 363 days a year to have a calf throughout the herd. What kind of heifer do we end up with? This isn't our saying it, but people remark several times, our heifers look like cows. You can't tell that that's an 850-pound heifer, right? They look like a cow. I don't know why, but they seem to get a lot of depth early. I think it's the early puberty, but the heifers seem to get a lot of depth early. This is the cow we'd be selling. This seems to be what nature wants. If you're talking about nature picking your cows, they want a big barrel, they want them slick, they want them fleshy, rather South Poley is what they are. And they're going to be fertile. And this is a middle-aged cow. Judy took a picture of kind of an average cow. Her udder's starting to get a little bit. She's 6 years old. This is the kind of cows we sell. Okay, I'm done.
So I got a question. We've got a little time today.
Okay.
Maybe we'll save a few, but let me give you something.
So just recently, I had a bull developer that most people here will recognize if I say the name, but he asked how our breed up was on our fall herd, and I said, well, they all bred. And he said, that's not that. You're doing something wrong. You have any idea why that would be said?
That they're all bred?
Yeah. Why would he question that? Why would that be something that you might be concerned about, or shouldn't we?
It depends on how far you want to pressure them.
Yeah, talk about that.
So in other words, when we pressure them by breeding in July and August on fescue. That's the pressure system. If we wanted to pressure them more, we'd go to 30 days, right? It seems like when you have, how many days did you have the bulls?
So that was 45 days, but the question,
the question that comes up is, so you have 90% or 95% breed up like Steve is or more. And we say, well, we want that. And you're going to go try to get that. His comments, his questions were, if you're getting that kind of breed up, what inputs are you doing to get that?
right.
Talk about that, because percent breed up is good, but percent breed up 95% may not be as good if you're doing a lot of inputs, but if maybe 80% is better if you're doing no inputs. Talk about that a little bit.
There is. Yeah, and that's, we always have to think on the input side. And when we say that, like what he was talking about, when it's 100%, most people are going to recognize that. If it's in a short breeding season, it's easy to get it in 60, 90 days. Then you have too many inputs. Now, Marv being a former dairyman, we're always going to be suspicious of them. Most former dairymen cannot help but feed their cows. They just can't help it. And that's what we're looking at. That's why when you get that 94 to 97, if you get 100%, it's usually a longer breeding season, or you're somehow pushing them and giving them supplements they don't need. So you want to, I don't know how well I explained the breeding system. I hope I did it well enough to understand, but it's pressure. We're always putting pressure on. That means lowering inputs, lowering our cost, and having the animals still perform. We want the cream to rise to the top. And you can't do that if you just do the same thing over and over and over again. So when you get where you're pretty complacent, which we're getting kind of complacent, we're getting kind of old, you know. And so we're not always pushing as hard as we used to. But if you get complacent, then you just stick there. But really, you should just keep seeing, hey, what else can I pull out? What else can I pull out? Or can I reduce it to 30 days? You know, Burke Tykert, who's a good friend now, he pushes us every time we see him. You guys ought to go to 30 days. Well, he's right. 90% of our cows calve in the first 30 days. And I talked to Judy. Judy is the union steward for the cows. She says, that's not fair. Because if a cow comes into heat the day before you put the bull in, and she misses once because she didn't get bred, she only gets one chance to breed back. Whereas a cow that comes to the heat one day later, the first day you put the bull in, and she misses, she gets a chance to breed back. If that makes sense. I don't know how it works, but she says you should have 2 full cycles so everybody gets the same chance. And I don't win that argument. So, you know, just to tell you about this philosophy real quick, Johann Zeitzman, he's a famous Zimbabwe cattleman, most astute cattleman I've ever met, just plain cattleman, really knowledgeable. He said, he went thousands of heifers through this nature system of selection. He said the Lassiter's system of selecting adapted fertile animals was infallible. And Jan Bosma, how many of you are familiar with linear measurements? Jan Bosma, I see Isaiah back there, raised his hand. Jan Bosma was his teacher, and he was considered one of the better cattlemen ever came out. He wrote Man Must Measure and developed the linear measurements. He said it was almost a perfect system for, you know, breeding adapted animals. And then backhandedly, he said, and it takes a person of no particular skills or ability to implement it. And Lassiter himself said anybody can do this system if they just have the willpower and the patience to stick with it. And I listened to that. Judy and I have been doing this for 30 years. And I'm not a stubborn man. But now Judy, she's German, got a lot of German in her, you know. So I think of that as, you know, kind of a more of a stubbornness that we stuck with it. And for me, I brought, you know, a man of no particular skills or abilities to the program. But that's how they think of it. Yeah. So we have found it to really work, but I don't want to overemphasize, but do emphasize how much the South Pole brought to this system. It was almost like they were bred just for what we were hoping to attain all those years with this system. And they're not all perfect. We're not bulletproof. And that was something I do want to say. Teddy Gentry spent a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of money, and very thoughtful work into building this breed. And I have seen, and I know Kim has seen, how quickly you can lose those maternal traits because they're not very sexy. Yearling weights, weaning weights, milking ability, EPDs, all of that is what everybody wants to hear about. Maternal animals are the ones that make you money, but they don't make anybody else money, or not very much. Most of the money that they make for you stays on the farm. And we lost a lot of our maternal breeds over the years, and this is a new one brought back. But we can quickly lose those traits if we don't keep our foot on the pedal and keep pushing for that culling and keeping the animals doing what they do well and keep trying to raise the bar a little bit. It's not done, and I see great opportunities for South Poles as commercial cattle throughout the Southeast and lower Midwest. They can't be beat, but there's just not enough of them yet. But I see tremendous opportunities for a commercial man crossbreeding his cattle to South Poles and starting to raise heifers like this and supplying people with commercial cows throughout the southeast and the southern Midwest. They're a great breed.
We still have 10 minutes, so maybe some questions. You just go ahead.
Anybody have questions? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Once breeders get established, a lot of times you're probably only going to buy breeding bulls. So what do you look for when you're buying a bull to put over your cattle?
He's asking, what do we look for when we're buying a bull? And, we're looking for pretty bulls, just like everybody else. But what we really look for is the system. We want to go see if Becky, how she grazes, how she raises her animals, is it similar to what we want to do? Then select the bulls, because pretty doesn't cut it. It's nice to look at bulls, and we all enjoy it. We love seeing that beautiful bull. But I can tell you, because we DNA test and we run a lot of bulls through, looks isn't always what our eye deceives us. Just like picking heifers, I can tell you we can't pick heifers, the best heifers. Our eye deceives us. What we want is a system. We want to go out and see that they're grazing and putting those animals under a little bit of stress, which it always is if you're if you're moving cattle every day. Done right, it's not a lot of stress, but that's stress. You want to see somebody who manages them the same way, has a breeding program and a breeding idea of what they're trying to accomplish, and then you buy the bull you like, because you're buying a system, not one individual bull. I can tell a quick story about, go ahead. How about more questions?
As far as mineral program at all, do you do anything? You said, so you're at the point where you don't need salt?
That's usually the second question on our farm. When anybody comes out, I'm going to be honest here. Minerals are like voodoo to me. I've worked on it hard for years. We've gone from $20 a cow animal unit in cost to $8 an animal unit. Big difference, right? When you're running 400, it makes a big difference. I don't. We try to get what we can out of our grass. We try to manage it the best way we can. We're trying to give them, we hope that we have a diverse pasture. We're hoping to get the minerals that they need out of the grass. Now, I'm not saying that minerals aren't there, but we used to always try to fix any problem we had with a bag. We don't do that anymore. We fix it with culling the cow. We often look at the lowest end of our cows and say, oh, we got to do something. We look at the top end of our cows and say, oh, we don't have to do anything. And so we feed a very basic mineral. In Missouri, we're low on selenium, so I have some of that in it. But on the whole, it's a very low-cost mineral. My neighbor is a mineral mix company, so they mix up a very low-cost mineral for me, and we do the basics. If we have a deficiency, we'll add that in later. But so far, we have not ever had a deficiency. So that's the answer to that question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What ratio of bulls to cows to bulls do you use?
Well, if we knew which bull was going to do all the breeding, we could go a lot lower. But we like lots of bulls. Got to have at least 3. You put 2 in, all they do is fight. You get 3, 2 fight, and the other one does all the breeding. So you want to have at least 3 in there. But our ratio is going to be anywhere from 20 to 30. We run yearling bulls in there with them as well. We run them with mature cattle. People have told us that we will stunt our bulls because we'll ask them to breed 15 to 25 bulls. And they're going to be 800 pounders. And that stunted bull, the best answer I heard was once again Johann Zeitzman. He said a bull that exerts itself to the extent that he stunts himself in serving the cows is a bull well worth having. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You're talking about mineral and how you're doing. How are you figuring out what the cattle needs? You said you look at the deficiencies. How do you find those?
Yeah, I wish I had a really good answer for you. He was asking what we look for in our deficiencies if our mineral isn't working. Low breed back would be a big one, okay? And with numbers like this, we're not having any problems. Sometimes you can look for that dull hair coat in the summertime. They don't shed out as early. On the other hand, sometimes they don't shed out as early. It just happens. The problem we have with mineral, and as I said, I think there's some really good mineral. I'm not trying to downplay mineral, but things almost always fix themselves. Example, we had pink eye problems. We are surrounded by cattle. I have one farm that buys cattle all over the country. from whatever sale barn is in a drought. And they come and they set stock them right next to us. We're nose to nose. And every four around us, all 4 around us have cattle set stocked next to us with pink eye problems. We got pink eye in our yearlings. We're going to some grass finishers. We can't use antibiotics on them. They come out of the program. They asked us to use kelp. We priced it. We really liked it. I mean, oh, this was going to be great until we priced it. And we were going right up to the end. We were going to use kelp to help the pink eye problem the next year. We'd had 2 years in a row. It was a fair amount. That year, I backed out. We just can't spend this much money. We had not one case of pink eye that year. We didn't feed the kelp. But if I had, I'd be selling you kelp right now. You see, and that's the variables. In biology, that's the problem with our business and coming up with set ideas is, this is biology, man. There's so much change, so much variable in what you're doing. It's really hard to get those answers. Now, the people who sell kelp could fix that problem. It's an easy thing to do is to run animals side by side with computer necklaces, feeders, so that one set gets the kelp and one set doesn't. Do that for 5 years and see who gets pink eye and who doesn't. Because when I called them to ask for some science behind it, they said, I can give you testimonials. I said, well, I know farmers. Once we buy something, it's good. It doesn't matter what else. Once we buy, it's good. He wouldn't give me, and then I said, so if you ran this trial and it didn't work, all you can do is go downhill, right? And he said, that's about it. And that's the truth. I mean, they don't have anything to gain as long as you have farmer testimonials. Doesn't mean I think it doesn't work. I've read some things, really good stuff about kelp. For heat tolerance in the summer, if you have animals that aren't doing it, the brown kelp does some really good work for heat tolerance. There's some real good science behind it. And there's some other things too. It's just that it gets so hard to pick. It's so easy to keep going up and adding more to what you're doing. So as far as the tolerance goes, breed up is the big one. Pink eye could be why, but the virus wins sometimes. The bacteria wins sometimes. And we always think that if we're running the animals perfectly, they don't get anything, like us. But, this is nature. And sometimes you gotta let the bugs, nature's gonna let the bugs win. And sometimes you just get pink eye. And I've talked to some around here, we're familiar with it, but there's a boviculi pink eye now. It's different than the bovis. It is a nasty one. And it jumps in on top of that bovis, and that's when you get those big blown out eyes, or it goes in both eyes, and it doesn't get over it in 2 weeks, and they have a little white spot. It's a much more aggressive pink eye. They scare me. I mean, if I knew kelp fixed it, I would feed kelp, but I don't. So, I don't know if I answered you very well there. Okay. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
In your operation, sounds like you're much larger scale than a lot of folks. So you have multiple herds and you're mixing them, and timing is very important. But for the smaller operator, you got basically one herd. Maybe you have a whole separated, but same management principles apply.
If I had a small herd, I wouldn't separate the heifers from the cows. That's a very small stress reducer. That would be my difference. I don't, the problem you run with the small herds, and it's what you always have, is the bulls. When you get knowledgeable enough, maybe you're going to be line breeding, so you use the same bulls on their daughters. But you run into that problem with small herds. But yeah, I would not separate the heifers. They can breed right along with the cows. We do it as much for Judy's sakes, we got a lot of them coming out. We want to keep them separate. Logistics, and also is a small stress reducer on them. But you wouldn't need that. That'd be your pressure putting on them, is having the heifers run right along with the cows. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.